What do you get when you cross a Shakespeare scholar and some of the trendiest books today? Let's find out. I've immersed myself in classical literature for most of my life, and I even have a MA in Shakespeare. However, it's only recently that I started reading contemporary literature. Today, I've been set the challenge to read and react to one of the most trending YA novels around today. That's right, I'm going to be reading A Good Girl's Guide to Murder, Shakespeare style. Let's dive in. Right, my first impressions. So we have Pip, who's a student, and she's investigating the murder of Andy Bell, another student from 5 years ago. And there appears to be another student who's accused of killing her, but Pip seems to think that he's falsely accused. So yeah, that's kind of the premise. She's obviously an amateur sleuth, which is very interesting. So if we're looking at Shakespeare, I know that Shakespeare didn't write any mysteries per se. In fact, mysteries really developed in the 1800s, back in Wilkie Collins with the sort of suspense or sensation novels. And then they sort of evolved into, Sherlock Holmes, where you really have the professional detective that you follow. And then into Agatha Christie with her amateur sleuth, Miss Marple, sort of like around about the 30s onwards. So Pip seems to have her grounding as an amateur sleuth, much like Miss Marple, sort of subverting stereotypes perhaps. So that's very interesting. But I expect that Holly Jackson, she probably has a very good idea of the different tropes of this genre. And as a contemporary novelist, I'm expecting her to play around with that a bit. So let's see. Another really interesting point is that there's a lot of media formats. So text messages, we've got maps, which is very interesting, audio transcripts as well, which is really interesting because we can play detective ourselves. It's like we're being presented with evidence. And you don't get that very often, although actually in Agatha Christie's first novel, The Mysterious Affair at Styles, there is actually a plan of the house, so it kind of helps you. But there's a map in this novel, which really helps to orientate you and see the different locations, which is a really nice touch. And also, given it's YA, it sort of helps to break up the novel a bit, make it a little bit easier for people to read. And in fact, actually, the language is very easy, very accessible, quite casual, a lot of dialogue. That being said, I found some little gems. There's some poetic language. I believe there was one point where the August pickled sun dipped into September. And there's another point where Pip it's described as, metaphorically as a knight squirming within her armour. So those are some very nice little gems. Hopefully they're sprinkled throughout the novel. And yeah, so those are my first impressions. I'll continue reading, see what else I can find. So I've progressed. I'm about a third of the way along. And it made me think about literary criticism. And there's a lot of ways to approach this, but I look at the traditional literary criticism. So that's the historical context, what the authors read, because we are a product of our, what we've read and our, where we are in our time today. Now, new criticism looks at the text just by itself, doesn't have any reference to history or the social context. Now, if we look at Holly Jackson, I've done a bit of research on her, and I know that she loves true crime podcasts. And that's definitely reflected in here. You can see that with the audio scripts, transcripts. And I also know that she has done some English degrees. So she's definitely read a ton of Shakespeare, plenty of Austen, and probably even some classical murder mysteries. And I'm definitely thinking that these things have influenced her writing for sure. If you look at the classical murder mysteries, she actually has a microcosm. So the English village, the classical idyllic English village, is in her novel, much like Agatha Christie. And it's such a good device to have because it contains the character list of suspects, and you understand the different locations of the village, and it also gives that sort of cozy vibe. But at the same time, at the beginning, I was reading about the killer's cell. His house is depicted as a haunted house. And that's very reminiscent of Hamlet. At the beginning of Hamlet, there's ghostly vibes because his father's just been murdered. So Hamlet, he's in pursuit of the truth. He's going against society, essentially. And he decides he instinctively knows that his father's been murdered and he's looking for the murderer. He thinks he knows who it is. Likewise, Pip, she's also in pursuit of the murderer and going against society. So there's a lot of overlap there, but we have to establish some rules. So the tragedy has rules, tragic rules. So we're looking at Hamlet is pretty much a catalyst for a look at his emotions, the psychology behind, and motivations as well. So there's that element. It's less plot-driven in that sense. Murder mysteries are more, their rules are very much looking for clues, very plot-driven traditionally, looking at the mechanics behind sort of like the puzzle, very entertaining. And we also look at sort of cardboard cutouts. It's a very typical trope. Very sort of 2D characters. But I think that Holly Jackson has added, gone beyond that traditional murder mystery. So we've got a lot more of the psychology and sort of emotion behind the characters. So Pip, she's very emotionally driven. She's not initially, that's not the real reason why she started her project, but she gets more and more invested, and there's more psychology and emotion that's unpacked in the novel, which is really interesting and does add to that extra interest and entertainment in the novel. So I'll carry on. We're getting so much suspense now. It's excellent. It's really keeping the reader on edge right now. I mean, it's fantastic. Holly, what are you doing to us? Okay, so Pip, she's bold. She's in pursuit of the killer. She's really pushing the bounds. She's putting herself in these. She's putting herself in danger. She's going to these secluded places. And why would you do that when you know there's a killer on the loose? It's really reminiscent of actually Christie's Poirot and Marple, where time and time again they either confront the killer or they walk alone with another character. We don't know whether we can trust them, but it's excellent. It's just, that's the way to build suspense. And the other thing is, we don't understand, or at least I don't understand, Holly Jackson's rules. So where is she willing to go with these characters? Is she willing to kill off a main character, our protagonist even? I don't know, because she's a new author to me. So that really puts you on edge and just really creates that suspense and really compels you to read more. So it's excellent. It's really, really gripping. And another thing, actually, which was great, is that she has a lot of comic relief. So Pip's really quite funny. She has her jokes. And it's actually very important to relieve the reader of, you can't have suspense all the time. And that's what Shakespeare does as well. He has his clown, his comic relief, even in the tragedies. And that's just an excellent balance, an excellent element. So yeah, it's a really great read so far. Really enjoying it. So I'll carry on. So I finished the novel and oh my goodness, Holly Jackson delivered. There was not just one twist, but 2 twists in the end, which is exactly why we show up for murder mysteries. It was very satisfying, and yeah, it was excellent read. Even the showdown at the end, so a really dramatic ending. So that's what the tension is all building towards, this dramatic ending. The emotion is at its height. And really that's fantastic. That's what even Hamlet, some of these tragedies, they have this sort of cathartic ending, this dramatic scene at showdown where it's required to sort of restore order out of chaos. And it actually has its roots right back to the Greeks, where the Greek tragedies, which is where Hamlet gets his legacy. And you can even see it coming all the way right through to modern literature. So that's really interesting. And I'm really glad that I was set this challenge to read diversely and to read this book that I wouldn't normally read. And yeah, I'm definitely going to be taking up the challenge again. And I hope you'll join me. So until then, I'll see you guys later.